let's look at another question. What is counter-dependency? Now, when I posted a video on codependency, there were a lot of questions on what would the opposite of this be. And I suppose counter-dependency would be the closest condition to the polar opposite of codependency. A counter-dependency is the psychological refusal to attach yourself to anyone or to rely on anyone. Now, it's something very different from individual autonomy, though, whereas individual autonomy simply entails making your own decisions and deciding what's best for you, independent from outside forces or coercion. Counter-dependency is a complete and absolute aversion to trusting and relying upon others altogether. People who suffer from counter-dependency tend to operate with a kind of avoidance mindset, which manifests in the tendency to steer clear of and to avoid interactions with other people as much as possible. It's for this reason as well that it's sometimes described as a flight from intimacy. People who are counter-dependent would absolutely refuse point blank to ask for assistance, even when assistance is really needed, and it would be very reasonable to ask for it. They try to minimize the impact of others in their own lives, aiming more to rely solely upon themselves. And of course, this means that they also struggle to form meaningful and intimate relationships with other people. Now, it can develop due to childhood trauma, generally during that very crucial phase in a toddler's or even an adolescent's life when they establish a certain independence from their parents. Toddlers often establish their independence by trying to be and do the opposite of what their parents desire, right? That's why we call it the terrible twos. Developmental trauma during this crucial phase of development can lead to a person remaining partially stuck in that counter-dependent phase that 2-year-old toddlers normally go through within the space of a year or two. Adolescents similarly seek to establish their independence from their parents as well, don't they? When, 13, 14, 15, they start to rebel again. And it's during this very sensitive stage of development into young childhood that if traumatic experiences during this phase, that can have a psychological effect. And so counter-dependent personalities will then develop due to a failure to heal properly from these traumas, whatever the trauma may have been. Yet, despite their aversion to dependency upon other people, counter-dependent individuals can and do suffer from a profound sense of loneliness, which can often result in depression. They can also have a very disrupted self-image because of their need to constantly manage their personalities so as not to appear weak or needy in any way. Relationships tend to suffer because they constantly second-guess the motives of people who try and get close to them. Naturally, of course, as would be expected, people with counter-dependent personalities also avoid therapy, like the plague. And when they do go to therapy, in some cases, they tend to try and keep the therapist at arm's length by attempting to avoid revealing their true feelings. Of course, this further complicates the process of healing, which is ultimately the aim of therapy, isn't it? To help them overcome this counter-dependency and build closer and more longer-lasting relationships with other people. Now, obviously, it shouldn't be confused with being self-sufficient or even fiercely independent. It's an entirely different animal altogether, and quite a destructive way to look at the world, and a very lonely way to look at the world. But, as I said, it's very complicated to get somebody with this kind of personality to seek help, because that's the whole point of the disorder, isn't it? They don't want help from people. Anyway, counter-dependency. There you go.